Hello, friends. Chris Corsi here, president of Thrive Today, and I want to welcome you to the Relational Skills in Real Life podcast. I'm glad you are here. Today's topic is an insightful topic on acting like myself. This is an important skill in the 19 skills that basically focuses on how do I be me right now in this emotion, in this feeling, in this situation. How do I be me? What would that look like? Or how do I get back to being me? So, friends, we're going to tease out an important question that often arises as people start learning relational skills, which is what's the difference between the acting like myself skill and the returning to joy skill? So, hopefully, by the end of today's podcast, there will be some clarity here on these differences, as well as how do I improve my ability to stay my relational selves. So, friends, you know what? Staying our relational selves means that we continue to be ourselves relationally while we are feeling an emotion, while we are dealing with a circumstance or a situation. And friends, just think about it. Jesus was really good at being his relational self. Like Jesus remembered who he was when people were trying to push him off cliffs, when people were trying to attack him or picking up stones to throw at him. They were testing him. He stayed his relational self. He continued to be about the Father's business, no matter what was going on. Even when he was nailed to a tree, he stayed his relational self. And Jesus would say, I only do what I see my Father doing, and I only say what I hear my Father saying. So, friends, how do we follow Jesus's example and reflect the living God while we deal with the hard stuff of life? Well, you know what? We have a beautiful reminder in Ephesians 2:10, which says we are God's handiwork, created in Christ Jesus to do good works, which God prepared in advance for us to do. And I've heard Jim Wilder say this actually means that we are God's poetry. But I want to think about this. We are created to do good works. And sometimes we get this backwards where we feel like we have to do good works to get right with God or to get some joy or whatever it might be. But what Ephesians is telling us is when we're being who God's created us to be, then you know what? We'll grow good works. Good works will be the byproduct of being the people that God created us to be. So, friends, let's tease this out a little bit. What is returning to joy and how is it different from acting like ourselves? And so, returning to joy uses what we call level 3 in the 5 level tier system in the brain. And so, level 3 is the cingulate cortex. And the cingulate cortex has a whole lot of important jobs. There's an anterior and there's a posterior. But the cingulate cortex, we'll just call level 3, really is looking for how do I share this with other people? How do I share my sadness with someone? When I'm at level 3 and I want a level 3 solution, I'm looking for a mind who will be with me and see me and hear me and understand me while I'm sharing my sadness or my frustration or whatever it might be. So our level 3 is where we need to learn to feel our feelings, share our feelings, and quiet our feelings. And so we call this returning to joy. How do I get back to my home base, my home state of joy and peace? And this is also what Romans 12 tells us about weeping with those who weep and rejoicing with those who rejoice. This is the level 3 thing. We are looking for someone who will be with us and sit with us and share some of what we are feeling. You know, you're at level 3 when you just can't wait to tell somebody about what's going on from your day. Like, I have to tell my friend this. You're not going to believe what happened to me today. That's level 3. Level 4 is how do I stay me while I navigate these feelings in this situation? So our level 4, which is the orbital prefrontal cortex behind the right eye, this is the right hemisphere. This is our identity center. And so what the level 4 is all about is how do I stay myself? And we learn a level 4 a lot from seeing examples in people that we want to emulate. So maybe I watched as you were frustrated because the gas pump wouldn't work and you got really frustrated, but you stayed relational. You took a deep breath and you went inside and talked to the clerk and you were able to stay you. And that's how my level 4 really learns and is trained by having models and examples that say, you know what, I would like to be like that person next time I feel some anger. And so our level 4 really focuses just on staying our relational selves. And you know what? I've got a story about level 4 here, acting like myself, that I want to share with you. And it was years ago, ministry I used to work with, once a year, we would take a big leaf tour in Michigan, right? The fall in Michigan, the leaves are beautiful. So we would make a day out of it. We would plan this day, we'd pack a picnic lunch, and we would go, usually 5, 6, even 7 cars packed full of people, and we would go on this leaf tour. And one year, I was leading the pack of about 5, 6 cars behind me. And my aunt, who was also part of this ministry, she was driving a car. And so I was going to lead this leaf tour and just be able to drive. And you know what? When you're leading a group of people, you have to make sure they stay with you. So if I lose somebody, maybe at a stoplight, then I would pull over to the side of the road until they caught up, and then we would continue the leaf tour. So as we were enjoying these beautiful autumn leaves and just spectacular views and colors, at one point, my aunt, who was driving behind me, pulled off into some parking lot. And some of the people who were behind her, some of the cars followed her, some of the cars followed me. They didn't know what to do. And I was the one that was supposed to lead this crew, right? So I'm trying to keep everybody together. I'm like, what is my aunt doing? So I noticed that she pulled into some parking lot, and she got out and she was looking at leaves with some of her friends in the car. So I tried to carefully turn around and go back to where she was and get everybody together again. And I noticed I was very confused initially, and I noticed some tension in my body when I was like, what is she doing? This isn't what we planned to do. I took a deep breath and I pulled up next to her and I was like, Sherry, what are you doing? I thought you wanted me to lead this and so forth. And she's like, well, this was a pretty spot. I just wanted to go see it real quick. I thought, okay, all right, well, let's try to stay together next time. And just let me know if you want me to pull over, then I'll pull over. She's like, okay, sounds great. Could feel relaxed again. My body was loosening up. Muscles were loose. My breathing was a little better at this point. Well, we're going. We go through another town. Beautiful, amazing day, and admiring the leaves. And then my aunt does the same thing. She pulls into some parking lot while some of the people keep following me. Some of the people follow her, and I'm like, what is she doing? So I noticed my body was getting tense. Like I could tell I was starting to really hang on the edge of enemy mode here. And I'm like, what is she doing? So again, I take a deep breath. My body's tense. I could feel the tension in my shoulders, and my mind was like really focused on this problem here, which was my aunt not cooperating with our plans for the leaf tour. I pull into the parking lot. I get out of the car. I walk up to her and I was like, Sherry, what are you doing? You know, I thought you wanted me to lead this thing. I was like, you're welcome to lead it if you'd rather lead it. She's like, nope, you go ahead. You lead it. This was a good spot. I was like, if you tell me to pull over, I'll be glad to. But I noticed I was getting frustrated. Like my piece was leaking out at that point. But I took a deep breath. Right. I calmed down. I was like, okay, let's try this again. And my wife was next to me in the car, and there were some friends in the back seat. So we start out again, everybody together, enjoying our leaf tour. And you know what? She does it a third time, and she pulls off into some parking lot, and same situation. So at this point, I'm just like exasperated. I'm feeling flustered. I could tell my face was red. And I was just confused, but I was flustered and mad at this point. I'm like, Sherry, I pull up next to her. What are you doing? I thought you wanted me to do this. She was like, oh, this was a good spot. So I knew at that point, okay, you know what? I'm going to be tender with my aunt's weakness right now. Something's going on in her attention here. So I took a deep breath. I said, Sherry, I love you. You know I love you, right? And she's like, yes, I know. I'm like, okay, well, we're going to come up with a new plan because this plan isn't working. I took those deep breaths. I said, I'm going to let you lead the group, and I'm going to follow in the very back. And you just go where you want to go, and I'll be in the back so we can all stay together. And she's like, okay, this sounds good. But I could just tell it was like her brain was very impulsive that day, and she was having a hard time tracking with things. So I noticed as I shared some of my frustration with my wife and the group, and of course the group was very perplexed as well, like what's going on here. I talked to Jesus in my mind for a few moments. And I was like, Jesus, how do you want me to handle this? This was very frustrating. And I had a sense of Jesus just saying, Chris, be tender. Like, just be tender with your elderly aunt. Like, what's really important here? And then I remembered what's really important is just for us to all be together and have a good time. So we came up with a new plan. I was going to go in the very back and let her lead. And you know what? The rest of the day ended up going really well. And I was very thankful for how that whole interaction went, because this could have been a little bit of a forest fire, but thankfully we were able to navigate it and stay relational. So at that point, I felt my body become peaceful. I could breathe deeply, and it just felt like I was back. And so, friends, this is what we would call an acting like myself story. And so I would reflect how I stayed me, or how I returned to me when I wasn't staying me and being my relational self. So, you know what? It's like me to be myself by taking deep breaths when I start to lose my peace. It's like me to stay relational with my wife and the people in the car. In fact, the feedback from some of the friends in the car, they were like, Chris, that really helped me to see your example. Like, if I would have been driving, I would have lost it with your aunt. I would have lost it. So I appreciated that you were kind, sympathetic, you were relational. And so it's like me to want to share my experience with other people by putting words to what I feel. It's like me to talk to Jesus when I'm losing my peace. And you know what? It's like me to be tender with weaknesses. My aunt had a weakness going on that day. So I was thankful that I could still have compassion and I could still care about her. And it's like me to be creative when we have a problem. When something's not working, it's like me to try to come up with creative solutions. And it's like me to be able to share my frustrations as well. So I was able to share my frustration with my aunt, who was very apologetic. And we ended up, handling that well. Thankfully, there weren't any relational casualties that day. But that would be a little example of being myself in a situation where I was feeling some strong feelings and navigating some frustrating circumstances. So what we want to look at today, as you think about maybe walking some of this out and gleaning some of this for your own life, would be, how well do you remain your relational self in difficult emotions? Maybe there's some emotions that are harder for you and other emotions might be easier. So just even recognizing, where do I need some work? Where do I have some strengths? Where do I have some weaknesses? And we can start noticing, how well was I able to stay myself in this day? So at the end of the day, you reflect on your day. What were some areas where you were able to stay your relational self and reflect your heart and your values? Or where did you maybe lose your ability to stay your relational self? And who do you know can help you grow in this skill? So this is where stories and examples are very important. We can share stories where we were able to stay our relational selves, or maybe where we did not handle something very well, but if we could do it over, how we would do it over again in a different way. So even how we repaired when we temporarily forgot who we were. These are all things that's going to help us be able to strengthen this skill. In our Thrive trainings, we spend a lot of time telling stories. And you know what? It's helpful to understand that sometimes where you have unprocessed pain, it's going to be hard for you to stay your relational self in a certain emotion or situation. So what would have complicated my leaf story example would be if I got triggered in some of the pain where I felt misunderstood, or I felt that people don't hear me or see me. Like, I could have slipped into some of my unprocessed pain, which would make that a harder situation to deal with. So sometimes we need to get some healing from those places where we felt alone, or maybe we have some unresolved pain that make it hard to stay our relational selves. So if you start noticing patterns in your life, maybe there's some pain there in some of these examples where you have a hard time being you. So just, we want to recognize that sometimes unprocessed pain will cloud my ability to grow the skill and to be my relational self. And you know what? We have a Jesus who's always with us, who's really good at these skills, by the way. So we always turn to Jesus in those times we've lost our peace, or we're looking for that example, or we're looking for his perspective. And we invite trusted friends who can also be with us while we maybe work through some of the pain that might be there. Who are some people that could pray with you and help you find Jesus? Or maybe you need a trained therapist or counselor. Basically, recognizing where you need some work and strengthening those skills. That's what we're all about here. And the good news is we can grow and improve this skill of staying our relational selves. It just needs some practice, some stories, some examples, and some modeling. So, sharing this skill with other people, sharing stories, and certain emotions is really an excellent way to grow the skill. And we spend a lot of time in our Thrive training focusing on some of these skills. Each track has its own version of these skills, but you know what? Track 2 is heavily focusing on the returning to joy skill as well as the staying my relational self skill. And on our website, we have a whole page on skill, what we call skill 12. It's just acting like myself. So if you go to thrivetoday.org, visit the skill 12 page, you click on the skill 12 and it'll take you to the resources and some more information on this important skill. And may this be the start of something good for you in your life as you improve your ability to stay your relational self, no matter what's going on around you.